My dad ate dinner with us every night for 3 years and never noticed my plate was always empty. My mother only wanted to starve one of her children, me. Not my perfect sister with her size 0 homecoming dress. Just me, the eldest daughter who took up too much space. When I was 11, we were all sitting around the table when my dad asked, "Why is Lauren's, my name, plate empty?" Before I could speak, I felt Mom's perfectly manicured nails dig into my shoulders. "She already ate. Had a big snack after school, didn't you, honey?" My dad ruffled my hair, distracted. And from there, my mom got crafty. My dad's 16-hour shifts meant mealtime was her territory. By the time I turned 13, the routine was carved in stone. Every morning at 6:55 a.m. while Dad was in the shower, Mom would make me stand on the scale she kept hidden in her closet. 65 pounds, she'd announced that particular morning, her voice tight with disappointment. Up 2 pounds from yesterday. No breakfast or lunch today. But Mom, the doctor said I'm growing. I was then cut off by the sound of her pulling out the lunch boxes. My little sister Ava's got a sandwich, cookies, apple juice. Mine got 3 celery sticks and a single rice cake. "Mom, please, Shh." She pressed a finger to her lips. "Do you hear that? That's Dad's shower turning off. Unless you want Ava to skip meals too, you'll smile and say goodbye like a good girl." And I never told my dad directly, but I gave signs. "Is it normal to feel dizzy when you stand up?" I asked him once over dinner. My mom's laugh was light and airy, like an empty stomach growling. You know how dramatic teenage girls can be. I was the same at her age. By winter, things were falling apart in ways even Mom couldn't hide. My hair was coming out in clumps, leaving them in the bathroom sink because I was too tired to clean up. And after I got caught fainting at school, my punishment was watching the family eat pizza while I had ice water. Dad texted that he was coming home early, and Mom scrambled to make me a plate that looked normal from a distance. When he walked in, he relaxed. "Good, everyone's eating." That was when I stopped fighting. I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't see the skeleton everyone else saw. I saw what Mom had been telling me for years. Too much space, too much flesh, too much everything. "You're right," I told her at breakfast. "I'm disgusting. I don't deserve food." For the first time in 2 years, she looked uncertain. "Well, maybe just a quarter of an apple." "No, I'm too fat for food." "You were right, Mom. You see, we both knew if I didn't eat anything, I would die. I was too depressed at that point to care anymore. But to Mom, it would mean lawsuits, court dates, potential life in prison. Dad noticed at dinner that night. "Where's Lauren's plate?" "I'm not hungry," I said, my voice flat. The room went silent except for my stomach, that was growling so loud it sounded angry. Mom started, but for once she didn't have a lie ready. "I haven't seen Lauren eat in 3 days," Dad said slowly, like he was putting pieces together. 2 days later, I collapsed right in front of him. "We need to take her to the hospital." "So you don't trust me? I'm her mother," my mom responded sharply. "That's not what Are you seriously undermining me in front of the girls?" Her voice cracked. "I do everything, and it's still not enough for you." "I'm sorry, you're right, you've been handling it." He dropped it. Then came my award ceremony in May. I won an academic achievement award. Turns out when you can't sleep from hunger, you have a lot of time to study. Walking to the stage felt like moving through water. And on the way up, my dress rode up to show my legs that looked like chicken bones. Someone gasped when I collapsed to the floor, unable to move. "Lauren!" Dad's voice cut through everything. He was standing, finally seeing what the baggy clothes had hidden. Mom rushed the stage like she'd been shot from a cannon. "Eat something!" She was screaming, trying to force it into my mouth in front of 300 people. "But Mom," I said into the microphone, calm as death, "you said I'm too fat. Remember? Every morning when you weigh me?" Dad's entire face stretched as everything clicked at once. The last thing I heard before passing out was Ava's voice, high and scared, finally telling the truth. Mom made me put laxatives in Lauren's food when she did eat. I woke up in the hospital to the sound of Dad crying. 73 pounds, he kept saying. "My daughter weighs 73 pounds and I ate dinner with her every night." The doctor's voice was professionally calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of disgust. "Mr. Hayes, she's been systematically starved for approximately 3 years. Her heart shows signs of chronic malnutrition. If she'd continued for another 48 hours, we'd be having a very different conversation." Mom played her last card from across the room where a security guard was watching her. "He made me do it," she said, voice steady as a snake. "He's obsessed with having thin daughters." I was protecting her from worse. They removed Dad from the house that night, pending investigation. Mom's story was convincing enough to create doubt, and Ava was too scared to say anything. And as I lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by heart monitors and IV drips, I smiled, because I knew what I had to do to get revenge on Mom and make it right. The beeping monitors pulled me back to consciousness the next morning, and I stared at the ceiling tiles while making myself a promise that this wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about fixing everything Mom had broken. My body felt hollow and strange, like a house with all the furniture removed, and when the doctor came in carrying a thick folder, his face looked worried in a way that made my chest tight. He sat down next to my bed and explained that my body was in something called refeeding syndrome, which meant if they gave me normal amounts of food right away, my organs could actually shut down from the shock. They had to increase my calories by tiny amounts each day, monitoring my heart and blood levels constantly, and even though Mom was somewhere else in the building, It felt like she was still controlling what went into my body through these medical rules. The IV drip felt cold going into my arm while he talked about phosphate levels and cardiac monitoring, and I nodded along even though the words felt distant and unreal. Later that afternoon, a woman with short gray hair and tired eyes walked in carrying a clipboard, introducing herself as Clarissa Mansfield from Child Protective Services, and right behind her came Mom, who immediately rushed to my bedside with fake tears streaming down her face. Mom grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard enough to hurt, while Clarissa asked me questions about what had been happening at home. And every time I tried to explain about the morning weigh-ins, Mom would interrupt with gasps and sobs about how Dad had been obsessed with having thin daughters. I tried to tell Clarissa about the scale in Mom's closet and the 65-pound goal, but my voice kept shaking and Mom kept talking over me, saying things about Dad commenting on our weight and making her enforce his rules. Clarissa wrote everything down, but I could see the confusion in her eyes, especially when Mom started crying about being a victim too, trapped between her husband's demands and trying to protect her daughters. That evening, after Mom finally left with the security guard trailing behind her, another social worker came to tell me that Dad had been removed from our house while they investigated Mom's claims about him being the real abuser. The guilt hit me so hard I couldn't breathe properly, making the heart monitor beep faster while I realized this was all my fault for not speaking up sooner, for letting it get so bad that now Dad was punished for Mom's crimes. 3 days passed in a blur of blood draws and tiny meals that my stomach cramped around, and on the third day I finally worked up the courage to tell my nurse about everything while she changed my IV bag. She listened without interrupting while I explained the daily weigh-ins at exactly 6:55 a.m. every morning, how Mom would make me stand on that hidden scale, while Dad was in the shower, and how she'd made Ava put laxatives in my food on the rare days when I was allowed to eat. The nurse wrote everything down in careful handwriting and promised to pass it along to my medical team, squeezing my shoulder gently before she left. The next morning, a tall doctor with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses came in and introduced himself as Dr. Elliot Roberts, explaining that he'd been asked to do a comprehensive examination to document any signs of long-term malnutrition. He was gentle but thorough, taking photographs of my thinning hair, the sores that wouldn't heal on my legs, the way my bones stuck out at sharp angles through my skin, and I could see anger building in his eyes even though his voice stayed professional and calm. He ordered special x-rays that would show bone density loss and detailed blood work that could prove this had been happening for years, not just recently like Mom was claiming. On my 4th day in the hospital, Miss Tess Salter from my school came to visit, her arms full of get well cards from classmates who probably whispered about me when I wasn't around. She sat on the edge of my bed and told me she'd been at the award ceremony, that she'd heard what I said into the microphone about Mom weighing me every morning, and she thought she could get the audio recording from the school's AV department. Her eyes got wet when she looked at how thin my arms were, and she promised to do everything she could to help prove what really happened. 2 days later, Mom showed up at the hospital with a huge production, carrying bags of food and crying loudly in the hallway about how they were keeping her from her sick daughter, how she just wanted to feed me and make everything better. Security had to physically escort her out when she started screaming at the nurses about conspiracy theories and how everyone was turning her baby against her, and I watched through my door's window as she fought against their grip. The next afternoon, a man in a rumpled suit came to my room and introduced himself as Demetrios Henry, explaining that Dad had hired him to handle the custody case and figure out how to get us back. He spread papers across my bedside table and explained the timeline for custody hearings, what kind of evidence we'd need to gather, how the legal system moved slowly. But we had to document everything perfectly, and my head spun trying to understand all the complicated legal terms. A week after that first interview, Clarissa came back to talk to me again, this time without Mom present. But she kept asking questions that made me want to scream, like whether I might have misunderstood Mom's concern for my health, or if maybe Mom was just trying to help me be healthy. She seemed skeptical when I explained about the punishments for gaining even 1 pound, about watching my family eat pizza, while I had ice water, about Mom telling me I was too fat to deserve food, and I could feel my chance at justice slipping away with every doubtful look she gave me. The next morning, Ava showed up at my hospital room with Mom standing right in the doorway watching us like a hawk. My little sister's eyes were puffy and red while she walked over to my bed and gave me this tiny hug that felt like she was scared I might break. Mom stayed by the door with her arms crossed and this fake worried look on her face. Ava sat on the edge of my bed and started talking about school stuff and her friend's birthday party coming up. When Mom turned to talk to a nurse passing by, Ava quickly pressed something into my hand under the blanket. I felt the folded paper and kept my face blank while Mom turned back to watch us. Later when they left, I opened the note and it just said, "I'm sorry," with a little heart drawn next to it. My eyes got wet because I knew she wanted to help, but was too scared of Mom to say anything out loud. That afternoon, I asked the nurse for a notebook and started writing down everything I could remember about the past 3 years. My hand cramped up after the first hour, but I kept going because getting it all on paper felt like taking back some control over my own story. I wrote about the morning weigh-ins at 6:55 a.m. and how Mom would make me strip down to my underwear to get the most accurate number. I wrote about the celery sticks and rice cakes for lunch while Ava got sandwiches and cookies. I wrote about watching my family eat pizza while I had ice water and how Mom would smile at me across the table. I wrote about the laxatives Ava put in my food when Mom made her do it. I filled up 30 pages over 2 days and my wrist hurt so bad I could barely hold the pen by the end. But having it all written down made everything feel more real and less like some bad dream I couldn't wake up from. On my 5th day in the hospital, they started me on physical therapy, and I could barely make it 10 feet down the hallway before my legs started shaking like jelly. The therapist was this nice older woman who held my arm while I took baby steps, and didn't make me feel bad when I had to sit down after just a few minutes. She explained that my muscles had been eating themselves for years, because my body didn't have any fat or food to use for energy. She said it would take months to build back the strength I'd lost, and that some of the damage to my bones might be permanent. We worked for 20 minutes before I threw up from the effort, and she helped me back to bed while telling me we'd try again tomorrow. Meanwhile, Demetrios was working on getting an emergency protective order, so Dad could come see us without breaking the investigation rules. He filed all the paperwork and included my written pages about what Mom did to me. 3 days later, he called to say the judge denied it because we didn't have enough proof yet that Mom was the one hurting me instead of Dad. The anger that hit me was like fire in my chest, and I told Demetrios we had to find more evidence because I couldn't stand Dad being punished for something Mom did. He promised he was working on it but said the legal system moved slow and we had to be patient. The next day, Tess showed up with a CD that was supposed to have the audio from my award ceremony. We played it on her laptop, but the quality was so bad you could barely hear anything except crowd noise and some muffled talking. You could kind of make out me saying something about being too fat, but the exact words were lost in the static. She looked so disappointed and promised she'd check with the school's AV department because they usually had better equipment recording these events. I thanked her for trying, even though I wanted to scream about how unfair it was that the one time I told the truth in public, we couldn't even use it as proof. Clarissa came back 2 days later with a folder full of papers from my school. She'd gotten the nurse's records showing all the times I'd fainted or felt dizzy over the past 2 years. There were 17 different incidents documented with dates and times and notes about how thin I looked. She added them to her case file and said it was helping build a pattern, even if it wasn't the smoking gun we needed. At least she wasn't looking at me like I was lying anymore, which felt like some kind of progress. A week into my hospital stay, the discharge planner came to explain that I couldn't go home while the investigation was happening. She said they were arranging for me to go to a step-down recovery program, which was like a halfway house for kids with eating problems. I wanted to get out of the hospital so bad, but I also knew I needed somewhere safe where Mom couldn't get to me. The place was 40 minutes away, which meant I'd have to change schools if I stayed there long enough. While all this was happening, Mom started posting on social media about how she was being falsely accused and kept from her sick daughter. Kids from the school started screenshotting her posts and sending them to me through Instagram. She wrote long paragraphs about how much she loved me and how the system was failing our family. She posted old pictures of us looking happy at the beach or at Christmas. The comments were split between people supporting her and people who'd seen me collapse at the ceremony. Reading them made my stomach hurt, even though I knew every word she wrote was a lie designed to make herself look like the victim. Elliot came in on day 9 with a whole stack of lab results that showed exactly how messed up my body was from years of starving. My iron levels were so low I needed supplements. My heart showed signs of damage. My bone density was like an old woman's, and my hormone levels were all over the place. He explained each test result, and what it meant in terms that proved this had been happening for years, not just recently. Seeing all those numbers and charts made everything feel more real than just my word against Mom's. He said he'd write up a detailed report for the court that would be hard for anyone to argue with. That same afternoon, Demetrios called to say he was subpoenaing the pharmacy records from the 3 stores near our house. He wanted to show Mom's pattern of buying laxatives in bulk every few weeks for the past 2 years. He was building a timeline that would match up with my worst days at the school when I'd collapse or have to go home sick. The legal stuff was moving slow, but at least people were finally listening and trying to help instead of just believing Mom's lies about Dad being the bad one. Clarissa showed up at the house 3 days later while I watched from the car window as Demetrios drove me past on our way to another meeting. She went inside with 2 other people carrying clipboards and cameras, and Mom must have been at work because her car wasn't there. They stayed for almost 2 hours taking pictures of everything. Later that afternoon, Clarissa called Demetrios and told him what they found in Mom's closet behind all her designer dresses. The scale was still there, pushed against the back wall, and someone had scratched tiny marks into the white paint beside it like a prisoner counting days. There were hundreds of them going up the wall in groups of 7. Clarissa took photos from every angle and said her hands were shaking when she realized each mark probably meant a morning I'd stood on that thing. The next day, Mom found out about the search because the neighbors told her they saw people going through our house. Within hours, she'd gone to the grocery store and bought enough food to feed a small army. When Clarissa went back for the follow-up visit 2 days later, the kitchen looked like something from a cooking magazine with fresh fruit bowls and meal planning charts stuck to the fridge. Mom had even printed out healthy recipe cards and left them scattered on the counter like she'd been using them for years. Watching from across the street where Demetrios parked so I could see, I wanted to scream at how good she was at this game. The step-down facility set me up with a therapist named Shanti Britton, who had this calm way of talking that made me feel less crazy. She taught me to write down facts in order without adding how I felt about them, just what happened and when. We practiced over and over how to tell my story without crying or getting angry because she said judges listen better to facts than feelings. Every session we'd go through the timeline and she'd stop me whenever I started saying things like, I felt, or it seemed like, and make me stick to what actually happened. It was harder than I thought it would be to just say the words without all the emotion wrapped around them. Dad finally got permission for a supervised visit after 2 weeks of lawyers arguing about it. He walked into the visiting room at the facility and just stood there staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. Then he dropped into the chair and started sobbing so hard his whole body shook. The supervisor had to get him water because he couldn't stop crying long enough to breathe properly. He kept saying he was sorry over and over until I finally told him to stop, because Ava and I needed him to fight, not fall apart. He wiped his face and nodded and promised he'd do whatever it took to get us back. That same week, Mrs. Salter called to say she'd been digging through the school's AV equipment from the ceremony. The main recording was bad, but the auditorium had a built-in system for hearing-impaired students that recorded everything separately. She played it for me over the phone, and you could hear everything crystal clear. My voice saying those words about Mom weighing me every morning, then Mom's panicked voice trying to force food in my mouth, then Ava's scared voice about the laxatives. Mrs. Salter burned copies onto 3 different CDs and gave them to Demetrios, who said this was exactly what we needed. 2 nights later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. It was Ava calling from her friend's phone, whispering so quiet I could barely hear her. She said Mom had been taking her to doctor appointments for constipation, but she wasn't constipated, and the doctor kept asking weird questions about her eating. My whole body went cold because I knew exactly what Mom was starting. Ava said Mom told her not to tell anyone about the appointments and made her promise to keep it secret from Dad. I told her to tell someone at the school if she felt sick or scared, and she said okay before hanging up really fast. The next morning during my therapy session with Shanti, I stood up too fast and the room started spinning. My legs gave out and I hit the floor hard enough to bruise my hip. Shanti called Dr. Roberts, who came over from the main hospital and checked my vitals while lecturing me about pushing too hard. He said the stress from all the legal stuff was making my recovery slower, and if I didn't slow down, I could end up back in the hospital. But I couldn't stop now, not with Ava in danger and Mom still playing her games. Clarissa tried to talk to Ava at the school the following week, but called Demetrios afterward sounding frustrated. She said Ava barely spoke and kept looking at the door like she wanted to run away. Every question got a shrug or an I don't know, and Clarissa couldn't get anything useful for the case. The system moved so slow while Mom had all the time in the world to coach her on what to say and what to keep quiet about. Demetrios met with me after that failed interview to explain that the judge wanted more proof before he'd grant a no-contact order. We had medical records and the recording and the scale photos, but apparently that wasn't enough to prove ongoing danger. I was so tired from fighting but knew we had to keep pushing or Mom would win, and Ava would end up like me. Demetrios pulled out his laptop and showed me the state recording laws, explaining that we lived in a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record phone calls without telling the other person. He suggested I call Mom and try to get her talking about what she did to me. Just thinking about hearing her voice made my stomach hurt, but I knew it might be the evidence we needed to protect Ava and finally make this stop. The next afternoon, I sat in Demetrios' office with my phone on speaker between us, while he hit record on his laptop. My hands were shaking, so bad I had to sit on them when I dialed Mom's number. She picked up on the second ring with this fake sweet voice asking how her baby was doing. I told her I was confused about everything that happened and maybe we could talk about it. She jumped on that so fast, saying she only ever wanted what was best for me and how the doctors were blowing everything out of proportion. Then she started talking about how she was just teaching me portion control like any good mother would, and how the morning weigh-ins were just to track my health. She went on for 10 minutes about how kids today eat too much junk food, and she was protecting me from obesity and diabetes. The way she talked about controlling my food made my skin crawl, but Demetrios kept nodding at me to keep her talking. She said the scale was a tool for accountability, and that I should be grateful she cared enough to monitor my intake when other parents let their kids get fat. When I asked about the laxatives Ava mentioned, she got quiet for a second, then said sometimes I needed help with digestion, and it was all natural anyway. After 20 minutes, Demetrios motioned to wrap it up, so I told her I had to go to therapy and hung up. He saved the recording to 3 different drives and said her language about control and monitoring was exactly what we needed even without a full confession. 3 days later, Demetrios called me excited because the pharmacy records finally came through after his subpoena. He spread the papers across his desk showing me the pattern he'd highlighted in yellow. Every 2 to 3 weeks for the past 2 years, Mom had bought the same brand of laxatives in bulk, always paying cash, but using her rewards card. The dates matched up perfectly with my worst days at the school that the nurse had documented. There was 1 week where she bought 3 boxes right before I collapsed during finals. Even Clarissa couldn't explain away such a clear pattern when Demetrios showed her the timeline matched with my medical records. She finally admitted this looked like systematic abuse and said she was pushing hard to get Ava placed somewhere safe immediately. But then she explained how the system worked and my heart sank. They needed to find an appropriate family member first. Then if that didn't work out, they'd look for emergency foster placement. But there was a shortage of homes willing to take teenagers. Every day that passed with Ava still in that house felt like I was failing her. I kept thinking about those weird doctor appointments she'd mentioned, and what Mom might be doing to her now that I wasn't there to be the target. Clarissa promised she was checking on Ava every few days, but that didn't feel like enough when I knew how good Mom was at hiding things. The next week, Missy Salter called to say she'd gotten 5 teachers to write official statements about my collapses and weight loss over the years. She read parts of them to me over the phone, and I felt my face burning with embarrassment. My English teacher wrote about how I'd fallen asleep standing up during a presentation, and how my clothes hung off me like curtains. The gym teacher said she'd tried to excuse me from running because my legs were like sticks, but I'd insisted on participating anyway. My chemistry teacher wrote about finding me passed out in the bathroom and how I'd begged her not to call anyone. They all mentioned noticing the dramatic weight loss but feeling unsure about how to help without proof of what was happening at home. Missy Salter said their statements would carry weight because they were mandatory reporters who documented concerns. Dr. Roberts spent a whole afternoon writing his medical report for the case, showing me parts of it during my checkup. He explained how the patterns in my blood work and organ damage were consistent with forced starvation, not self-restriction like in typical eating disorders. He wrote about how my heart showed specific signs of chronic malnutrition that took years to develop. The bone density scans revealed damage usually seen in elderly patients, not teenagers. He included charts showing how my weight had dropped in a pattern that suggested external control rather than internal mental illness. His professional opinion stated clearly that this was medical child abuse, not a psychiatric eating disorder, and he attached all the test results as proof. The report was 15 pages long, and reading it made everything feel more real and horrible than when I was living through it. 2 weeks before the hearing, I was sitting in the day room at the step-down facility when a nurse came to get me. She said someone was causing a scene in the parking lot, and security thought I should know. I looked out the window and saw Mom standing by her car with grocery bags surrounding her, crying and waving at the building. She was yelling about wanting to feed her baby and how they were keeping her from taking care of me. Other patients' families were staring as she pulled out containers of food and held them up like offerings. Security was trying to get her to leave, but she kept crying about being a mother who just wanted to nourish her child. I turned away from the window and went back to my room, proud that I didn't feel the need to respond to her performance. The staff filed an incident report about her trespassing and disturbing treatment, which Demetrios added to our evidence file. Then suddenly everything shifted into high gear when Demetrios called saying the hearing had been moved up by 3 weeks due to a cancellation in the judge's schedule. We had 4 days to finalize everything instead of almost a month like we'd planned. I spent hours at his office organizing documents while he made copies and created exhibit labels. Shanti rearranged her whole schedule to give me extra sessions to prepare for testifying. She had me practice answering the same questions over and over while she played the role of Mom's lawyer trying to trip me up. She taught me to take 3 deep breaths before answering anything and to keep my hands folded so I wouldn't fidget. We practiced what to do if I felt panic rising, how to ask for water if I needed a break, and how to keep my voice steady even when inside I wanted to scream. She reminded me that truth was on my side and I just had to stick to facts without getting emotional. By the 4th session, I could answer even the nastiest questions without my voice shaking. During all this, Ava managed to visit me with one of Mom's friends, who didn't know she wasn't supposed to leave them alone together. The second the friend went to the bathroom, Ava pulled out this small notebook from her backpack. It was Mom's food journal where she'd been tracking my weight and what I ate for years. Each page had dates, numbers, and notes about my compliance or resistance to her rules. Some entries described punishments for gaining even half a pound. Ava said she'd found it in Mom's closet and snuck it out while Mom was at work. I wanted to cry seeing proof of everything written in Mom's own handwriting, but when I showed Demetrios, he said we had a problem. Since Ava had taken it without permission and given it to me directly, the chain of custody was broken, and Mom's lawyer could argue it was stolen or tampered with. We needed to establish its authenticity through proper legal channels. He sent it to a handwriting expert for analysis, but warned me the results wouldn't be ready before our new hearing date. The legal system's rules felt so frustrating when the evidence was right there in black and white showing exactly what she'd done to me. Dad started going to parenting classes 3 times a week at the community center downtown. He'd sit in the front row taking notes like his life depended on it, and brought home folders full of handouts about childhood trauma and protective parenting. Every session got documented with certificates and attendance sheets that Demetrios added to our court file. Watching him actually work on himself instead of just feeling guilty made something inside me start to trust him again. 2 weeks later, I went back to the school for half days, starting with just morning classes. Kids stared at me in the hallways and whispered behind their hands, because Mom's Facebook posts about being a persecuted mother had gone viral in our town. Instead of hiding in the bathroom like I wanted to, I kept my head up and walked straight to class. The school counselor pulled me into her office that first day with paperwork for something called a 504 plan. It meant I could eat snacks during class whenever I needed to, and take breaks to sit in the nurse's office if I felt weak. The official accommodations made me feel less like a freak, and more like someone who deserved support. That night at the recovery facility, I woke up at 2 a.m. with my heart racing and couldn't catch my breath. My chest felt tight and my hands were shaking, but instead of hitting the panic button for staff, I used the breathing exercises Shanti taught me. I counted backwards from 10 while picturing a safe place, and within 15 minutes my body calmed down. Getting through it alone felt like winning a small battle against the scared part of me. The next morning, Demetrios called to warn me that Mom filed an emergency motion claiming Dad was coaching me to lie. He already filed a counter motion with all our evidence, including the pharmacy records and medical reports. The legal papers flying back and forth made my head spin, but Demetrios said this was normal desperation tactics. 3 days later, a reporter from the local paper called the facility asking for a comment about teen eating disorders. The article came out that weekend without naming names, but everyone knew it was about us because it mentioned a recent award ceremony incident. The whole town was talking about it at the grocery store and coffee shops, which meant the court couldn't ignore the case anymore. Dr. Roberts met with someone from the district attorney's office about filing criminal neglect charges against Mom. He showed them my medical charts and explained how systematic starvation differed from self-imposed restriction. Having actual law enforcement looking at criminal charges instead of just family court gave me real hope that Mom might face consequences. Meanwhile, Ava managed to do something incredible while staying at Mom's friend's house for a playdate. She used the friend's phone to record Mom coaching her about what to tell the judge at the next hearing. Mom's voice on the recording was clear as she told Ava to say Dad never let them eat dessert and always commented on their weight. Ava gave the recording to Clarissa during a school visit, and my little sister's hands were shaking, but she stood tall. Clarissa immediately took the recording to her supervisor and pushed hard for Ava's emergency removal from Mom's custody. Her supervisor wanted more documentation first, which made me so mad I threw my water bottle across my room. The system protecting Mom while my sister was still in danger felt completely backwards. Clarissa kept pushing though and documented every concern while building a stronger case. 2 days before the next court date, we finally got the call we'd been waiting for. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including Ava's recording, and ordered supervised contact only between Mom and both of us. It wasn't full protection since she could still see us with a court supervisor present, but it meant she couldn't be alone with us anymore. I sat on my bed at the facility and let myself feel relieved for the first time in weeks. 3 days later at the supervised visit center, Mom sat across from us in a small room that smelled like old coffee and cleaning supplies. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman with glasses, was checking her phone in the corner when Mom leaned forward and grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks. She whispered that we were destroying everything she'd worked for, and that Dad would never be able to handle us alone without her guidance. I kept my face completely blank and didn't pull away, even though her nails were digging into my skin. Ava started crying and the supervisor finally looked up, but Mom had already let go and was sitting back with a sweet smile on her face. After the visit ended, I wrote down everything she said word for word in the notebook Demetrios gave me, and took pictures of the red marks on my wrist with my phone. The court date came 2 weeks later, and my stomach was doing flips as we walked into the courthouse. The room was smaller than I expected, with wood panels on the walls and a big desk where the judge sat looking through papers. When they called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand and put my hand on the Bible even though my fingers were shaking. The lawyer asked me to describe the morning weigh-ins, and I told them about standing on that hidden scale at 6:55 a.m. every single day while Dad was in the shower. I explained how Mom would announce my weight and decide if I got to eat based on the number, keeping my voice steady even when Mom started sobbing loudly at her table. The lawyer asked about the food restrictions, and I listed everything: the 3 celery sticks, the single rice cake, watching my family eat pizza while I had ice water. Mom's crying got louder, but I just kept talking, telling them about the laxatives Ava put in my food on Mom's orders and how I collapsed at the school over and over. When I finished, the whole courtroom was quiet except for Mom's fake sniffles. Mrs. Salter took the stand next and pulled out her laptop to play the audio from the award ceremony. The sound filled the courtroom, my voice coming through the speakers saying Mom told me I was too fat every morning when she weighed me, then Mom's panicked screaming trying to force food in my mouth. The judge's face got harder and harder as she listened, her pen tapping against her desk. Dr. Roberts came up after that with a whole folder of charts and medical reports. He put them on a screen and showed the pattern of malnutrition going back 3 years, explaining how the damage to my heart and organs matched systematic starvation, not self-imposed restriction. He pointed to specific dates where my weight dropped and matched them to Mom's laxative purchases, speaking in this calm, professional voice that made everything sound even worse. Mom's lawyer kept objecting, but the judge told him to be quiet and let the doctor finish. Clarissa was next, and she brought pictures of the scale from Mom's closet with all those tally marks scratched into the paint beside it. She played the recording Ava made of Mom coaching her about what to tell the judge. Mom's voice clear as day, telling my little sister to lie about Dad not letting us eat dessert. Clarissa admitted she was skeptical at first, but said the evidence was overwhelming that Mom had been the one starving me. Demetrios stood up with his timeline presentation, showing receipts from the pharmacy for bulk laxative purchases that lined up perfectly with my school collapses and hospital visits. The visual display on the screen made it impossible to ignore the pattern, each purchase date connected with a red line to an incident report from the school or medical record. Mom's face was getting redder and redder as more evidence piled up against her. When Mom finally took the stand, her lawyer tried to guide her through safe answers, but she couldn't help herself. She started talking about how children need firm boundaries around food and consistent structure to develop proper habits. The judge asked her directly if she weighed me every morning, and Mom said monitoring weight was part of good parenting. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear as Mom kept talking about portion control and teaching discipline through food management. The judge finally cut her off and said she'd heard enough. After what felt like hours of waiting, the judge came back with her decision. Dad would get temporary custody of both of us immediately. Mom would only get supervised visits once a week, and she had to undergo a full psychological evaluation before the permanent custody hearing. The relief hit me so hard I almost fell over in my chair, but I knew this was just the beginning, not the end. 2 days after court, I woke up at the recovery facility with my heart racing and skipping beats. The nurse called an ambulance, and I ended up back in the hospital for monitoring because the stress of everything had triggered an arrhythmia. Dr. Roberts said this was normal for someone recovering from severe malnutrition and court proceedings, but it scared me how my body could still betray me even when I was finally safe. Dad picked us up from the hospital in his old truck and drove us to our new place, a tiny 2-bedroom apartment above a pizza shop. The smell of garlic and cheese came through the floors, and Dad apologized for not being able to afford anything better, since Mom had cleaned out the joint bank account. We carried our garbage bags of clothes up the narrow stairs, and I told him I didn't care if we lived in a cardboard box as long as we were together and away from her. The first week in that apartment, Ava barely spoke to anyone, but Dad found Shanti's number in the hospital paperwork and scheduled an appointment for her. I watched Ava walk into that first session with her shoulders hunched up to her ears, and when she came out an hour later, her eyes were red, but she looked lighter somehow. Over the next few sessions, Shanti got her talking, and one night Ava told us Mom used to make her eat everything on my plate when I couldn't finish, then punish her if she threw up. She said Mom would weigh her too, but in secret, telling her she was getting close to being a problem, like me. Each thing Ava revealed made my hands shake with anger, but it also made me more determined to keep her safe. Meanwhile, the ADA called Dad to say they were filing preliminary criminal charges for child endangerment and neglect. Mom posted bail within hours and immediately went on social media, posting old family photos with long captions about being a devoted mother, torn from her sick daughters by a vindictive ex-husband. She started a blog called Falsely Accused Mother and wrote daily posts about the persecution of protective parents. The comment section filled with supportive strangers who didn't know the real story, but her constant need to control the narrative actually helped our case because she kept contradicting herself in different posts. The victim advocate at the courthouse helped me record my impact statement in a small room with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzzed. I sat in front of the camera and talked for 43 minutes straight about the morning weigh-ins, the empty plates, the laxatives, the hair falling out, the heart problems, everything in order with dates and details. My voice stayed steady even when describing the worst parts because Shanti had taught me to focus on facts, not feelings. When I finished, the advocate said it was one of the clearest statements she'd ever recorded. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Mom's number. Her voice was shaky and fake sweet as she said she forgave me for the misunderstanding and knew I was confused and sick, but she loved me anyway, and hoped we could be a family again once this was all cleared up. I saved the message to my evidence folder without listening to it twice, finally strong enough to not need her approval or even her acknowledgement. 3 months crawled by with depositions and hearings and meetings until finally the settlement hearing arrived. The judge reviewed everything, including Mom's psych evaluation that showed narcissistic personality disorder, with delusional features and set terms where Mom had to complete 18 months of mandated treatment. Dad kept full custody, and there would be a review in 6 months to reassess. Mom's lawyer tried to argue for unsupervised visits, but the judge shut that down immediately. It wasn't perfect justice because Mom wasn't going to jail, but it meant Ava and I were legally protected while Mom had to get help whether she wanted it or not. The next week at my outpatient program, something shifted during lunch. I sat down with my tray of spaghetti and salad and realized I wasn't counting calories or feeling my chest tighten. I just ate, bite after bite, until my plate was empty. The nutritionist saw me finish and literally jumped up to high-five me, and for the first time in years, I felt proud of my body for surviving everything Mom had done to it. Our new routine with Dad took shape slowly but surely. Every night at 6:30, we sat around the tiny table that wobbled unless you stuck a folded napkin under one leg, and we all ate the same meal. Dad wasn't a great cook, so we had a lot of burnt grilled cheese and overcooked pasta, but we were eating together. The first few dinners were quiet and awkward, but gradually Ava started telling jokes from the school, and Dad started asking about our days, and I started actually answering. One night Ava laughed so hard at something Dad said that milk came out her nose, and that sound, her real laugh, not the careful one she used around Mom, healed something inside me that I didn't know was still broken. I started putting together a binder with everything from this whole experience, not for court, but for something else. I organized all my medical records showing the malnutrition diagnosis, the heart damage reports, the therapy notes Shanti helped me get copies of. I added the legal papers, the restraining order, the custody documents, the criminal case files. Then I found online resources for eating disorder survivors, contact info for lawyers who handled abuse cases, templates for safety plans. I realized my revenge on Mom wasn't about destroying her anymore. It was about building walls so high and strong she could never hurt us again. Looking at that thick binder full of evidence of everything I'd survived and overcome, I knew I was. So much stronger than that 65-pound girl standing on Mom's scale, too scared to speak up, too hungry to think straight, too broken to believe I deserved better. All right, that's it. Congrats on making it to the end. Clearly you don't value your time much. Go on, hit subscribe and double down on that decision.